Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Many Canadians, including here in Lethbridge, came out in support of 1 Million March for Children in cities across the country. The rallies, however, were also met by a number of counter-protesters. We hear from Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas, who explains how policies from the Trudeau government are forcing some people to live in their cars. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky explains how Russia is now weaponizing energy.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Canadians from across the country came out to join in the 1 Million March for Children. The rallies were held in protest of the sexual orientation and gender identity, which is a tool being used in elementary schools. The rallies, however, were also being met with voices of opposition from allies of the 2S LGBTQ+ community. Now in Lethbridge, hundreds from both sides gathered outside of City Hall to make sure their voices were heard. BCN's Jeanette Rocher was there and files this report.
Trans lives matter! Trans lives matter!
They were carrying signs, waving flags, using megaphones, and shouting chants. Both sides present, both sides passionate. Coordinators of the 1 Million March for Children in Lethbridge organizing a 9 a.m. school walkout to meet at City Hall at 10 a.m. Then at 11 a.m. take the short 5 to 10 minute walk to the Lethbridge School District office and then back again to City Hall.
So the policy and procedures that we do not agree with and do not want in schools is SOGI, which is the sexual orientation and gender identity ideology. And what that does is it teaches kids from kindergarten, from a very small age, where they're not developed mentally to even understand or comprehend what is being taught to them. It confuses them. They should not be receiving sexual education in elementary school.
Shell Landry is one of the organizers of the march in Lethbridge, who says in addition, she's strongly against parents not being informed about what their kids are learning at school or if they've changed their identity. But many on the opposing side, those who are allies of the 2S LGBTQ+ community, say school might be the child's only safe space if they have parents who are unsupportive.
There wasn't a lot of support just at home in general. But going to school, there were teachers there who were able to make sense of my emotions. I had friends who would help me figure things out. I didn't feel alone. I often found when I came back home, I felt more lonely, wishing that I could just go back to school to see my friends.
I got beat up, bullied. I got called every name in the book. I was called slurs a lot. And being that person that youth can look up to, and they can hopefully look at all of us and go, I can speak up too. No matter where I come from, no matter what I do, I can speak up.
This mom, who wishes not to be identified, says she feels the message of today's march is getting lost.
Our group has nothing against LGBTQ+. We are not against any child. We just want our rights protected as well as their rights protected. And so why can't we create a safe, inclusive space for all kids?
At the end of the day, it appears both sides want the same thing, to protect kids, but just in very different ways. For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Rocher.
Leighton Gray is a lawyer and the host of Gray Matter on Return to Reason, airing here on Miracle Channel. Leighton is out at the 1 Million March for Children in Lloydminster and joins us now via Zoom. Leighton, what has the turnout been like today?
Oh, it's been great. We have about 500 or 600 people. Really, the experience has been joyful. People here just talking and sharing their experiences. We had some incredible speakers. Tanner Naday, who's a local economist and theologian, was here. He shared a story from Scripture about Daniel. We also heard from some very touching letters. One lady related a story about her 9-year-old daughter who sadly committed suicide, if you can believe it, because she was pressured into accepting, transgender ideology in school. But overall, that was part of the story. But overall, it was just a wonderful day. We had music and food and fellowship. There was a very concerted, determined group of counter-protesters, but overall they were peaceful. They came out and we showed respect for them. They're Canadians. They have the right to express their views, and we just basically lived under the Lord's second commandment, love thy neighbor.
Thanks so much, Leighton. That was lawyer Leighton Gray joining us from the 1 Million March for Children rally in Lloydminster. David Leese is the VP at the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, who's also a host on Return to Reason. David is at the 1 Million March for Children in Abbotsford, British Columbia. He also joins us now via Zoom. David, what are you seeing thus far at the rally?
We had about 2,000 people show up here, very enthusiastic, very impressive, like from parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, you name it. And I had the chance to talk with dozens of people, and I was so impressed by their determination and their emphasis that, hey, we want to be the parents of our children. It's not the state, it's not anyone else, it's us as the parents. So I think that, it's such a very positive atmosphere. You've got people here who are also saying, hey, we're for the trans side or other takes on this issue, but they're here. The emphasis was saying, hey, we love everybody. So I thought that was very, very positive. But I think what you have here is the overwhelming message that parents want to be parents in charge of their kids, not the state.
Thanks so much, David. That was David Leese, VP at Frontier Centre for Public Policy, joining us from the rally in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Now, the president of the Alberta Teachers Association also weighed in on the 1 Million March for Kids. Jason Schilling says parents who protest SOGI, or sexual orientation and gender identity, being used in schools need a better understanding that SOGI is not part of the Alberta school curriculum.
SOGI is not curriculum. Curriculum is created by government for teachers to teach in school. SOGI is not curriculum. It is a resource. Is a way for teachers to create inclusivity within their classroom so that every student feels safe. People who are protesting against SOGI, I'm not sure if they understand the difference between SOGI and curriculum. And that is really a big issue, I think, that needs to be clarified here, because the Alberta Teachers Association doesn't write curriculum. We give input on curriculum when we're asked to, but we don't write curriculum.
You know, the first day of fall is not until Saturday, but those leaves are already changing color. Angela Stewart is in now with a quick peek at the forecast. Angela, not only is it looking a little more yellow outside, but we may also be seeing more moisture in the forecast again soon?
Yeah, a little bit, but not much though, so that is good news. However, we will be cooling off over the next couple of days before warming up back up into those plus 20 temperatures. So looking forward to that. We reached a high of 15 degrees today with partly cloudy skies. Expected to dip down to a low of 6 tonight. Tomorrow, like I said, cooling off. Moisture is expected. There's about a 30% chance of rain in the forecast for tomorrow. 16 degrees the high tomorrow, and then down to a low of 8. As for how the rest of the week is shaping up, I have much more details coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Angela. Tensions continue to rise between Canada and India following the shooting death of Hardeep Singh Najjar. He was a Sikh leader in Surrey, British Columbia, who was gunned down on June the 18th. Canadian intelligence suggests that India was involved in the killing. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the Indian government needs to take the matter more seriously.
India, the government of India, needs to take this matter with the utmost seriousness. We are doing that. We are not looking to provoke or escalate. We are simply laying out the facts as we understand them, and we want to work with the government of India to lay everything clear and to ensure that there is proper process.
Hardeep Singh Najjar had publicly mentioned the threat to his life for months and said that he was targeted by intelligence agencies. CSIS and local law enforcement agencies were aware of the threat to Najjar, as well as other Sikh activists in Canada.
A travel advisory has been issued by India's foreign ministry. It's urging its citizens to be careful when traveling to Canada. This comes as the two countries are locked in a diplomatic tussle following allegations that India may have been involved in Sikh leader Najjar's death. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's allegations has served to deepen the rift between our two countries, despite being key strategic partners on security and trade. Federal Industry Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne says his meeting with Canada's top 5 grocers went fairly well this week. The Trudeau government is asking executives, including those at Loblaw, Metro and Walmart, to put a game plan together to help stabilize food prices.
What we've asked is for them to take meaningful action to stabilize prices of grocery in Canada. And they have to come back with plans that we're going to be looking at and that we're going to be able to report back to Canadians, because we want that to be as transparent as possible.
But the Prime Minister says they'll be lowered.
Well,
will they
listen,
lower?
The objective is to stabilize prices in Canada, because what we've seen over time is the delta between general inflation and food price inflation has been dislocated. So what the mission we've been given is, let's stabilize prices in Canada and let's have them take meaningful action. Now, that being said, obviously what we want is competition. I've given them an objective, but if you'd been in the room, you would have seen that each and every one of them will try to outcompete the other, because it's not about the government of Canada. It's not about me or the Prime Minister. It's about millions of consumers. So now, since they understood what is being asked of them, they're going to compete with each other.
Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas says Canadians simply cannot get ahead. She says poor decision-making by the Trudeau government continues to hurt families financially, including many here in Alberta.
The costs are skyrocketing. We know that grocery costs went up by close to 7% just within 1 month. We know that people are having to spend several $100s just for a couple bags of groceries. I'm hearing story after story come, into my office, either through email or phone call, or people coming in person to tell me about the difficult time that they're having just to make ends meet. And so we know that affordability is a big issue that Canadians are facing. Certainly, those in Lethbridge are no exception. Canadians are finding it very difficult. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the carbon tax is applied to the farmer, and then it's applied to transport, and then it's applied to the grocery store, and then it's applied to transport again, and so on and so forth. And so by the time, that carbon tax has accumulated over and over and over again, and it gets to the consumer, they're having to bear the brunt of that. And they just can't do it anymore.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas and myself coming up in the second half of our program. Lethbridge Family Services is handing out some nice hardware for their Friend of the Family Awards. The honors recognize those who've shown excellence in service to a family life cause or issue, excellence in direct service to a family, or exemplary action on behalf of a person or distressed family. The Director of Communications with the LFS, Michelle Gallucci, explains where and when the awards will be handed out and who the big winners are this year.
This year, the Lethbridge Family Services Friend of the Family Award will be handed out tomorrow at the NMAC Centre during our annual general meeting. The individual award will go to Adley from Petra Pharmacy, and the group award to Stafford Family Dental.
The LFS Friend of the Family Awards have been dished out since 1988, and to date, there have been 116 recipients here in Lethbridge. Pickleball enthusiasts gathered Wednesday morning for the unveiling of 6 new courts that opened in the north part of our city. The courts, which are directly adjacent to the old ones, offer brand new features for players. Officials say this project has been a long time coming. BCN's Angela Stewart has more.
It's considered the fastest growing sport in North America, and now more people will have room to play pickleball in Lethbridge. 6 brand new dedicated courts officially opened in Legacy Park, with dignitaries serving up the ball for the unveiling.
Now, of course, this isn't the end for pickleball. This is my own personal perspective. I think pickleball is growing more and more in this community, and we as a council and as a corporation have to strive to find new locations, because I can't see this sport ever really coming to an end. It's only going to grow more and more.
The new facility is part of the city's 2022-2031 capital improvement plan, with funding for the project at over $600,000. The courts, which are located next to the original 6, have plexi-pave coating on the ground and windscreens to help with better play.
The surface itself is a painted surface that has some sand in it, so it offers the ability for the ball to bounce true. With Lethbridge, we have usually 30 to 40 K winds, and if you don't have windscreens like we have here, it's almost impossible to play.
General Manager of Recreation and Culture for the City of Lethbridge, Robin Harper, says this has been a multi-year project as far as planning.
Trying to get it within budget, and then obviously today is the culmination of that to have the official opening. We're excited about it. The club is extremely excited about it, and it just speaks to the popularity of the sport right now.
Harper suspects many people will be utilizing the space as the sport of pickleball continues to grow.
I think with the trend we're seeing with the popularity of it and the growth of it, I can foresee us looking at building more courts throughout the city in the future.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Looks like so much fun. A two-day event to showcase the work of emergency services is being held in Lethbridge. Heart of a Future Hero is running in the city at Lethbridge Fire Station number 4. Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services and Zoll Medical teamed up for the event aimed at educating future and current EMS professionals about cardiac care. EMS Operations Officer Mike Humphrey says the workshops helped high school students get some hands-on practice at cardiac arrest response.
Some of the students have participated in advanced airway management, CPR, mechanical CPR, and then using real-time feedback devices to take care of patients. When a person grows up in a community, they're more likely to, and that they're invested in that community, they're more likely to give really good care in that emergency services role. You know, even if someone doesn't really want to be a paramedic at the end, it's really great for them to see what is out there and another perspective on what emergency services does.
The Heart of a Future Hero event is on until September the 21st. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is accusing Russia of weaponizing energy. He says that is having a dramatic effect, creating a very dangerous situation for many.
Russia is weaponizing nuclear energy. Not only it is spreading its unreliable nuclear power plant construction technologies, but it is also turning other countries' power plants into real dirty bombs. Look, please, what Russia did to our Zaporizhia power plant. Shelled it, occupied it, and now blackmails others with radiation leaks. Is there any sense to reduce nuclear weapons when Russia is weaponizing nuclear power plants?
A former detention and torture site in Argentina has been added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. The Old Navy School of Mechanics, which was also an illegal detention center, was used during the last military dictatorship in Argentina. Close to 5,000 people were detained there, with many tortured and later simply disappeared during the regime. There were also allegations of pregnant detainees being housed at the facility until they gave birth, with their babies being taken away by military officials. Workers at the site, which is now a museum, say it's an important part of their history that many will never, ever forget. Wow, it's incredible. Well, we had a nice run of some incredible temperatures here in southwestern Alberta, but things, however, may be cooling off a little bit. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, we saw a little bit of frost earlier today in southwestern Alberta. The mercury has been dropping quite a bit lately. It's been feeling a little bit more like fall. Angela Stewart is in now with all of the weather details. Angela, the first day of fall is officially on Saturday, but so many of the leaves are already changing color here in Lethbridge.
Yeah, Hal, it is really nice to see all those leaves changing, all the pretty colors. But with that comes cooler temperatures. We are now into fall. Those cooler temperatures are expected to kind of last for the remainder of the week before warming up over the weekend and then into mid next week. As you can see there, rain expected for tomorrow. There's about a 30% chance of it to a high of 16 degrees. That's the same for Friday. Cloudy conditions. And then warming up, like I said, on the weekend, 22, 21 for Saturday, Sunday there. And then expecting midweek next week, some cloud coverage, 24, 23 for Monday, Tuesday. Our average high for this time of year is 19 degrees. Our average low is 4. 31 degrees, a balmy 31 was the highest temperature recorded back on this day in 1938, -6 back in 1995. Our sun rose at 7:15 this morning, expected to set at 7:34. That puts us at about 12 hours and exactly 19 minutes of daylight for today. So when we're looking at temperatures across the country now for Thursday, going to be feeling cooler as to be expected near the water in Victoria. Going to be feeling more like 18 degrees. Lots of sunshine, however, though, if you are more in the city parts. Cooler as you move inland, 18 tomorrow. Nonetheless, beautiful conditions and lots of sunshine, so good stuff there for a Thursday. 19 tomorrow in Edmonton, lots of sun, and then a little cooler in Calgary, 14 there. And going to be cooling off over the weekend, but otherwise looking beautiful. So not much to complain there. To our friends east of us in Saskatchewan, cloud coverage is kind of what's to be expected for both Saskatoon and Regina. Those low 20s for tomorrow. Low 20s is kind of what's to be expected for the remainder of the week there if you are in those areas. Rain though, all the rain in Winnipeg for tomorrow, 20 degrees. Around a 60% chance of rain is to be expected there tomorrow, so keep that in mind if you are in those areas. Looking to the central part of the country now. In Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto, 22 for all of these areas, so not too bad there, those low 20s. Lots of sunshine, some cloud coverage, so great conditions all around. In Atlantic Canada, though, it's looking to be a different picture. There is lots of rain in those areas. 13 degrees, the lowest temperature recorded for tomorrow in St. John's and Charlottetown. 19 though, and 18 in Fredericton and Halifax. And that is a look at your full weather forecast.
Unifor National President Lana Payne says a tentative deal with Ford creates a solid foundation for future bargaining for auto workers in Canada. The union reached a tentative contract agreement late last night covering more than 5,600 workers at Ford facilities in Canada. Along with higher wages, Unifor says its other key priorities were pensions, job security, and the transition to electric vehicles. The agreement is expected to set expectations for Unifor's contract talks with General Motors and Stellantis. The CEO of WestJet is warning that the global push to decarbonize the aviation sector by the year 2050 will lead to a major increase in ticket prices. Alexis von Hansbroek says the airline is investing in newer and more efficient planes to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. He says what the industry really needs, however, is financial and regulatory support to spur the use of sustainable aviation fuel. He adds that WestJet is the single biggest consumer of petroleum products in Alberta, spending around $1 billion annually on jet fuel. Canada's corporate ethics watchdog is investigating whether Levi Strauss Canada is using products that rely on forced labor in China. It comes following a complaint from a group of 28 organizations to the Ombudsman for Responsible Enterprise. The UN says China has committed serious human rights violations against the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities. Levi Strauss denies the allegations and say they're based on outdated information. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 4 points on the day to finish at 20,214. The Dow was down 76 points to 34,440. The S&P 500 was down 41 on the day to 4402. And the Nasdaq was down 209 points to 13,469. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 92 cents to $90.28 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 11 cents to $2.74 U.S. Gold was down 1 cent to $19.30.29 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 4 cents to $23.24 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.66 per bushel, barley's at $7.40, canola's at $16.72, and corn is at $8.90 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was up $1.10 to $186.78. Feeder cattle were up 68 cents to $254.18, and lean hogs October contract was up 93 cents to $85.78. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.28 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, thousands of protesters took part in rallies across Canada on Wednesday called 1 Million March for Children, Leave Our Kids Alone. The rallies were held in protest of the sexual orientation and gender identity tools that are being used in elementary schools. Hundreds also showed up in Lethbridge, including a number from the 2S LGBTQ+ community who counter-protested. The peaceful rally began at City Hall and made its way to the Lethbridge School Division. Canadians are still having a very difficult time with inflation and the high cost of living. That's according to Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas, and she says a big reason for it are policies that have been brought forth by the Trudeau government. MP Thomas will explain in more detail shortly. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca. Inflation has risen to 4%, and so many Canadians are still having a very difficult time making ends meet. Whether it's meeting mortgage payments, rent, purchasing groceries, paying bills, or even putting fuel in their vehicles. Will things turn around anytime soon? Now, to chat about the plight of many Canadians right now and what we're going through is Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas, who joins us from Ottawa. Rachel, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thanks, Hal. It's so good to be with you.
Rachel, your leader, Pierre Poilievre, says part of the issue right now is the federal carbon tax, which continues to hit many Canadians very hard, including our truckers and our farmers.
Yeah, for sure. We know that this is a problem. The Liberals have been hell-bent on applying a carbon tax to the Canadian population, and they've said that this is somehow going to save the planet. But in fact, we don't actually see evidence of that. What we do see evidence of, however, is that costs are skyrocketing. We know that grocery costs went up by close to 7% just within 1 month. We know that people are having to spend several $100s just for a couple bags of groceries. I'm hearing story after story come, into my office, either through email or phone call, or people coming in person to tell me about the difficult time that they're having just to make ends meet. And so we know that affordability is a big issue that Canadians are facing. Certainly, those in Lethbridge are no exception. Canadians are finding it very difficult. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the carbon tax is applied to the farmer, and then it's applied to transport, and then it's applied to the grocery store, and then it's applied to transport again, and so on and so forth. And so by the time, that carbon tax has accumulated over and over and over again, and it gets to the consumer, they're having to bear the brunt of that. And they just can't do it anymore.
Now, your leader, Pierre Poilievre, says he also has a plan to make housing more affordable. The average house price in Canada right now is hovering around $700,000. Rachel, how can a young married couple even afford to save up for a home like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of young people are feeling quite hopeless. In fact, we know that 9 out of 10 young people have actually lost the dream of home ownership. Not because it's something that they don't desire anymore, but rather because they just don't see opportunity. They crunch the numbers and they don't see how it could possibly work. We know that, the cost of owning a home has doubled under this government, whether it's rent or mortgages or saving for a down payment. People are finding that extremely challenging. It didn't have to be this way. This is largely the impact of inflationary spending brought on by the Liberal government, and it has driven the cost of everything, including, of course, housing. At the end of the day, as Conservatives, we have a plan to restore Canadians to their rightful place where they can afford the basic dignity of home ownership, where they can do so in a safe neighborhood, because ultimately they're bringing home powerful paychecks that can pay for that. So that's our plan going forward, and we'll definitely be committing to that and delivering on that for Canadians.
Now, you've witnessed firsthand people who've actually lost their homes and are now living in their vehicles?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very sad. I've had a number of stories come into my office, individuals who have popped by to tell me, just the circumstances that they're facing. I had one couple, tell me their story. They had to let go of their home because they couldn't afford their rent anymore, and so they were living in an RV. I had another couple come in and they said that they had to, ultimately, their home was foreclosed on, and they ended up living in their vehicle. I've had plenty of others who have said, they're not able to make their rental payments and they're concerned about, being evicted. Others who are not able to make their mortgage payments, they're having to sell and downsize. These are the types of stories that are coming into my office on a daily basis. And so it makes me very concerned for the constituents that I serve here in Lethbridge, and of course, wanting to make sure that their future looks better.
The House of Commons unanimously agreed to adopt the Liberal government's bail reform bill at all stages and send it to the Senate for review. Now, didn't Mr. Poilievre help get the ball rolling in that regard to make it harder for some repeat violent offenders to be granted bail?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is something that we've been advocating for quite some time now, is bail reform. And with that, what we mean is ultimately getting crime off the streets, making them safer, allowing Canadians to live in confidence that they're going to be okay. We've watched over the last number of years under this current government, we've watched as crime has skyrocketed. In particular, violent crime has become, more prolific. It doesn't matter whether it's a coffee shop or a subway, or, another public space. We are watching as violent crime ensues. And the reason for that largely is because of the current catch and release policies. This government brought something called Bill C-75 and put it in place a couple of years ago. And it has resulted in, violent criminals being arrested, but then allowed out, maybe only a day or a few later. And of course, they're going on to commit further crimes. And it's the Canadian people that are put at risk. So yes, the government's, initiative is a good start, but Does it go far enough? No, absolutely not. The government needs to cancel its policies and redo the whole thing. And that's something that Conservatives are committed to, when we form government going forward.
Rachel, the government in India says the Canadian government is far too soft on terrorists. Now, the statement comes following information that India may be linked to the shooting death of BC Sikh leader Hardeep Singh Najjar, who was gunned down in Surrey, BC, back on June the 18th. Rachel, let me ask you, is Canada too soft on terrorists?
Well, I can appreciate the question. I think, it's certainly one that is percolating in the minds of many Canadians. And I guess I would say this, Canada is based on the premise that we support the rule of law and that we uphold it as the fundamental pillar to peace, good governance, and order. And so with that, we know that we have to take a strong stance against, terrorism or any terrorist activity here in Canada. Under Stephen Harper, the former prime minister, tough laws were put in place. Good policy was implemented. So at the end of the day, the structure is there to support action. It's up to the government to actually use that policy that exists. And I would say that what we've seen under this current Liberal government is that they're just not. For whatever reason, it seems that they're turning a blind eye. And so as a result, then, they're actually failing to do one of their primary jobs as government, and that is to keep the Canadians of this country safe and secure. And so, they're making the choice to do that.
Many cities across Canada still have an opioid crisis. We see so many vulnerable Canadians battling addictions who are homeless, sleeping in the streets, transit shelters, or setting up encampments. What kind of pressure is your party putting on the federal government to not only address crime, but to stop the huge influx of drugs making its way into our towns and cities, Rachel?
Yeah, certainly, top of mind for many folks, especially in the community of Lethbridge and certainly across the country. People are watching as their parks are less safe, their streets are less safe, other public spaces are less safe because of an overwhelming amount of drug use in public spaces. We know that, opioid use has increased significantly in the last number of years, again, largely due to government policies. So the Liberal government determined that they were going to create a taxpayer-funded opioid crisis. That is essentially what they have done because they determined that they were going to go down this road of supposed safe supply and so on and so forth. And so having created this mess, they're really leaving it up to us as Conservatives when we form government to clean it up. And the way that we would intend to do that is two things. In terms of those that are using the drug, our desire for them would be to exercise compassion and to see them restored. So we would want to see them in treatment and recovery, and we would want to see them return to a dignified life. For those that are, creating the supply and pushing the hard drugs, we would want to see them shut down and properly processed in the courts. And so these would be the steps that we would take in order to ensure that safety is restored to Canadians.
Let's talk about Bill C-18 for a moment here. It's impacted so many news organizations, including us here at Bridge City News. We had close to 45,000 followers on our Facebook page, Rachel, who can no longer see any of our content ever since the Trudeau government told Meta and Google that they must pay for the Canadian news content. Meta so far said, okay, Canadian news organizations can no longer use our platforms to post. We were okay with the deal. I mean, we provided the content, they provided the platform, it was good. What have you heard in Ottawa? Will there be a resolution to this anytime soon?
Hal, this is a sad one because, certainly Bill C-18 was talked about in the House of Commons for, well over a year. And during that time, my Conservative colleagues and I over and over and over again raised this point that, in fact, Bill C-18 was going to result in less access to news, less choice within news, and altogether it would be harmful to Canadians. And in fact, that is exactly what is playing out. So Bill C-18 was supposed to, according to the government, it was supposed to support local news. Bridge City News, would fall within that category, of course. However, we found that it's doing the exact opposite. It's actually shutting down local news, whether that's local newspapers or local stations such as Bridge City News. They are all detrimentally impacted by Bill C-18. And the reason for that is because Google and Meta have determined that they are just simply no longer going to carry news links. Again, we warned the government that this would be the case. They foo-pawed us and said, no, that's not going to be the case. This is going to support news. It's going to make it so much better. Well, guess what? It's playing out exactly the way that we predicted. The unfortunate thing is that it's ultimately Canadians who are going to suffer. We saw this just recently with the wildfires in the Yukon, where people couldn't access news quickly within their Facebook pages because it just wasn't made available. And so it actually created detriment for them in the middle of a crisis. That type of thing is not okay, and the government could have prevented that.
I'm getting actually a comment here from our senior producer, Renee Paul. She wants me to ask you about digital ID, since it's become such a big talking point these days, and where you actually stand on Canadians getting digital ID.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's certainly a concern that I'm hearing from constituents in Lethbridge. They certainly want to make sure that their privacy is protected. They want to make sure that their autonomy is protected. They're certainly not big fans of government, dictating to them what they can and cannot do, or tracing them or surveying them, if you will. And certainly, I would stand with them in opposition to those things as well.
Now, the latest polls show that your party has a fairly comfortable lead in many parts of Canada. Some polls actually have the Conservatives with a 10-point lead over the Trudeau government, the Trudeau Liberals. Is there any talk in Ottawa of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh potentially pulling the plug on this Liberal NDP coalition before the year 2025?
Oh, we could only hope. Certainly, I hear from many Canadians that they just cannot wait for the next federal election. They would love for it to come sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, it would appear that this coalition between the NDP and the Liberals is quite strong still. It would seem that it's quite cozy, if you will, and so I'm not sure that we can anticipate it, breaking apart anytime soon. That said, lots can happen, and so of course, we're going to continue working hard as Conservatives, and we'll be prepared for the next election, whenever that should be called. And I know Canadians are anticipating that as well.
So if the writ actually did drop today and you had to hit the campaign trail here in Lethbridge, what would you really be campaigning on? What would your platform look like? What are some of the big issues here in our city?
Yeah, certainly our leader has spent the entire summer traveling across the country, and he attended over 150 events and talked to tens of thousands of Canadians during that time. And the big issues that came back to him, number one would be affordability and people having a really hard time just making ends meet. The next issue that we are hearing over and over and over again has to do with crime and safe streets. Another issue, which is top of mind for Canadians, of course, is housing. Young people want to be able to dream about and plan for owning a home. Right now, they can't do that, and that's because of the current Liberal government's policies. And then the last issue that we're hearing coming up over and over again has to do with just freedom of speech, freedom of belief, freedom of mobility, etc. Those basic Canadian freedoms, those fundamentals that are committed to us as citizens. And so people are concerned that those are under attack and certainly wanting that to be restored. So these would be the things that we would be advocating for on behalf of Canadians, and really looking to restore common sense to our country, put policies in place that are going to serve Canadians well, and restore to goodness.
What do you think of Pierre Poilievre losing the glasses, dressing a little more hip or casual when he travels across the country, meeting with Canadians? Do you think Canadians now have a good handle on who your leader really is?
I think Pierre really put his best foot forward this summer in terms of getting out there and traveling coast to coast multiple times over, meeting with Canadians from all places, all sectors, all ways of life, all beliefs. And just, he really took it upon himself to listen to Canadians and to really hear what they were saying. And I'm really proud of him for doing that hard work. And so I think increasingly he's being noticed for the hope and the optimism that he's delivering. And I think people are taking a solid look at him as the next Prime Minister of Canada.
Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas, thanks so much for joining us today from our nation's capital in Ottawa.
Thank you for having me, Hal. Great to be with you.
Digital ID and digital currency seem likely to become the norm in developed countries in the near future. Some love the convenience this brings and potentially better protection from organized crime. On the other hand, there are most certainly some very real privacy concerns around this technology. Joining us today is Sharon Polsky. She is the president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. Sharon, welcome back to Bridge City News. It's great to have you back.
Wonderful to see you again.
Absolutely. Now, recently, G20 nations made a decision to work towards implementing the use of global digital ID and digital currency. Why are these governments so keen on this, and what are the benefits?
Well, really, it's like with every new technology. Digital ID, centrally controlled digital currency, they're technologies that offer benefits and risks. But whether something's a benefit or a risk, and to whom, is something that's a matter of perspective. So consumers, I mean, we all benefit already from the convenience that comes with being able to use digital transactions. Your Apple Wallet, sending money by PayPal or Interac, it's everywhere. And we've gotten very used to relying on those conveniences. Credit cards, it's everywhere. And it's so common that people rely on digital to make their purchases that about 7% of Canadians no longer carry cash. That has that's a problem, though, because if more people stop using cash, it's easy to spin that as saying nobody uses cash, nobody needs cash, we don't need to have cash, and move it to digital. It's a way of justifying it. It's a problem, though, and we'll talk about that. And digital isn't just a convenience for you and me. Companies benefit from using the digital tech, and they've enticed consumers to sign up for things like loyalty programs that track what we buy. So merchants can sell and profit from that information. So It fuels an economy based on surveillance. And let's not forget the third leg of this equation is government. They benefit hugely from digital activity. And they're, on one hand, eager to increase international trade, and having single uniform digital currency would eliminate a lot of red tape. We also look at digital identities being touted as essential for everything from avoiding fraud and protecting children, of course, but it also means sharing very sensitive information, typically providing a copy of your government-issued photo ID to some company somewhere in the world that, like every company and government, promises to safeguard our information, and they apologize when it's been breached. So we're being told, don't worry, we'll protect it, this is the way it has to be, as if it's a foregone conclusion, an inevitability, and there's no point even questioning it. And it's got some serious ramifications.
So you've touched on some of the potential cons. I want to hear more about this because I know there's concern that governments might use digital currencies and IDs to monitor their people's spending and crush dissent. So how easy would it be for a government to do so?
Well, I wish I could say it's a huge challenge and it's in the future, but we've already seen it happening. Having digital technology that is centrally controlled allowed Tesla to increase the battery power in its cars that were stuck in traffic jams trying to escape impending hurricanes. With a few keystrokes, a remote adjustment meant people were able to make it to safety. We've also seen central digital control that allowed the power companies in Texas to reduce the power consumption in homes across the state during a heat wave by remotely adjusting smart thermostats. There was no warning. People were very uncomfortable, to say the least. And one company in Texas has an incentive program that basically you sign up to allow them to adjust things centrally, and they'll enter your name into sweepstakes. A similar program was just announced in Ontario. So that's not financial, But governments already know that freezing someone's finances, whether it's an individual or a country, that is the easiest, most effective way to lock someone out of society and commerce and to coerce cooperation. And never knowing if something is going to happen after you say or do something, that is a tremendous way of encouraging people to self censor. If you don't know that something you post is going to be seen in a different view by the authorities, you don't say it because you can't afford to be without money. You can't buy groceries, you can't feed your kids, you can't pay your mortgage or your rent. So people are already being very quiet. And we also saw it with cancel culture. And during COVID, we saw some countries, notably China, of course, monitoring individuals centrally, controlling their mobility based on everything from their social credit score to what they posted online to their vaccine status and their health. When all of the information about us is digital and a central authority has access to it all, we don't know what they're doing and what their perspectives are. The problem is what's legal today, but is deemed illegal tomorrow without us being told, can have massive, very serious consequences. And not only in a financial perspective, but for health, freedom, the fundamentals of democracy are being attacked here.
We had numerous stories of people having their bank accounts frozen when they were protesting government mandates during COVID-19 pandemic. So this is nothing new. But I assume that these G20 nations are promising to put protections in place to safeguard against government abuse. But realistically, can citizens really trust these safeguards?
We've been told for decades now, trust us. We have protections in place. We have logical, physical, and administrative protections to protect your information. But when you look behind the curtain, it's like the Great Wizard of Oz, the protections sometimes, often aren't there. And that's why we've seen everything from governments across Canada last week to the Pentagon to NASA to every major corporation and government getting hit with cyber problems. So for all the assurances, technology is not perfect yet. It's created by imperfect people. It's not tested adequately before it's launched. That's why there's the patches that are released so frequently to fix the problems that are built into systems. So I'm reluctant to be as trusting as we're told we're supposed to be able to be. They haven't earned my trust yet.
So will governments make it mandatory to use digital ID and currency, or will they still allow cash for those who are still uncomfortable with digital, especially with digital ID and currency having flaws, as you mentioned?
Well, making it mandatory is going to be a challenge. I know the Canadian government, like so many others, have been exploring the possibility, and some proponents say, yes, it would be a terrific thing, and in some ways it would be. And they're saying, don't worry about the risks, it's not a problem. As you say, we'll protect your information, it's convenient. They're saying all the right things. But the Government of Canada did its own studies and found that achieving wide adoption and acceptance of central bank digital currency will be a challenge because most Canadians right now have access to different methods of payment: cash, credit card, bank card. They also found that 11% of people with internet access refuse to bank online and 16% do not shop online. So getting people to use digital ID and digital currency might be like facial recognition at the airport, where it's not mandatory, but nobody tells you there's any options, so people go along. And I also look to, there's a lot of countries that have already been exploring and tried to launch digital currency. One in particular has not failed dramatically like others, but they are very eager to make it work, and that's Nigeria. They have faced huge economic problems, corruption, inflation. So to stem all of that, the government issued new currency, and they outlawed the old currency. But when they outlawed the old currency, they only issued a very limited amount of the new bills. And that forced everybody to go digital or starve. Literally, there was riots in the streets, and the government did not back down. So it's very there's a power imbalance. And when it comes to digital ID, I mean, we have companies in global companies, some of them based in Canada, as well as Canadian banks and governments that are part of an industry association. These are companies that design, build, and promote digital ID tech. And they have gotten together and created a pan-Canadian framework for digital identification. And they're saying that is the way to go. That is the future. They insist that it's a very privacy sensitive, privacy protective way of going about it. And I look at them and think how they are profiting from using your ID and mine. And on the other hand, we look to countries in Europe where it's already and has been for a long time very much the normal course that if you move to one of these countries, if you move from one area of the country to another area in the same country, if you are immigrating, you have to actually register with the police and they know everything about you. So people there are already very accustomed to carrying national ID cards, and moving it to digital is being promoted as just the more convenient, efficient, natural course of events. But I look back in history to a time not very long ago when that same sort of information was used with very rudimentary technology compared to what we have today. And that information was used for dark purposes with devastating results.
We only have a few minutes left, but I really want to talk about cryptocurrency for a little bit because it's often used to avoid government overreach. But what's its future if digital currency is implemented? Does this mean crypto would inevitably be shut down, or will it find another way to continue?
The people who deal in crypto, who promote it, who hack other systems, they often are based outside of the countries that have extradition treaties. They have the means, the money, the motivation. They basically can do what they want. And people are like animals in the wild. We will take the path of least resistance. And if digital cryptocurrency is something that these people want to promote and use, they will find a way around the regulations.
Now, European regulators recently fined TikTok $368 million for failing to protect children's privacy. Can you just share your thoughts on TikTok and other social media and what parents need to be on the lookout for?
Oh, it used to be so easy to tell parents just to watch what their kids do, talk to them, teach them about the risks. But technology has outstripped that. We have technology, deep fakes, where somebody can watch the news, record it, have you and me suddenly speaking in some foreign language, and the movements of our lips will work according to that other language.
Right, yes.
The technology is fantastic. It also means that people can and have created what's referred to as synthetic porn. A man in Quebec actually earlier this year was sentenced for creating synthetic child porn. How to stop it though? It's a problem because, I mean, the fines, the numbers are massive, and they would put you and me into bankruptcy in an instant. But when we have companies that make billions of dollars in net profits every quarter, a few $100 million is a relative drop in the bucket, and all it is an expense off their financials. So it reduces their tax burden. Really, it's insignificant. And when you equate it to what's the penalty worth per person who's been affected. I mean, Meta was fined $275 or so million or US money earlier this year for a breach of privacy of over 500 million people. That works out to 55 cents per person. That's all. So it's a big number, but do the arithmetic, and it's a drop in the bucket. So they have no incentive to actually change their ways.
We're just about out of time, but Sharon, some of our viewers do want to take action to make a difference in these kinds of matters when it comes to digital ID, digital currencies, artificial intelligence. What are some things that these people can practically do to either prevent the implementation of digital ID and currency or to protect themselves as much as possible from compromising their privacy?
There's a couple of very simple things I think everybody needs to do, besides educating ourselves about what this is really about and what it entails, and not just listening to the companies that they're in a compromised position. They're interested in improving their profits and bottom line. And nothing wrong with it, but we can't rely on what they say. First of all, use cash. It's as simple as that. When we say support local, and I see people going into the local shop, the local coffee shop, and handing over their credit card. The merchants automatically hand over the tap screen, and customers automatically hand over a digital form of payment. The merchant loses to the credit card company because part of the payment goes in fees. And the message there is nobody wants cash, nobody uses cash, we don't need cash. So first of all, use cash, and it sends a very, very clear message. The other thing is tell our lawmakers at every single level of government what we want and what you don't want. Email them, phone them, write them an old-fashioned a letter. I mean, it costs absolutely nothing to mail a letter to an MP in Ottawa. Even better, talk to your local riding association. We're coming into a federal election sooner than later. There's municipal and by-elections. Tell your riding association that digital ID, digital currency, and privacy are important to you. Make it an election issue. The elected people, the people we elect, are supposed to represent the electorate's views. They haven't in a long time. We need to change that.
That was Sharon Polsky. She is the president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada. Sharon, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, anytime.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.